Hello, everyone, and welcome to MSUFCU's Financial Education Seminar Series. We appreciate you all joining us and are excited to be here with you virtually today. These presentations were created with you in mind, with the intention to give financial education on a number of relatable topics to help expand your knowledge of finances. Each event will be hosted by a member of our financial education department or one of our partners, like today, connecting you with resources in our community. We have a number of diverse presentations planned for you this year, and you can explore and register for them by visiting us at msufcu.org/events. Today's event is being recorded. To rewatch or share the presentation, go to youtube.com/MSUFCU and then select the MSUFCU seminar series from the playlist options. Recordings are generally available within about 2 weeks of the event. We will have time after the presentation to address questions submitted to the Q&A. We'll also be addressing some of those during the presentation if they're applicable to the slide we're on. And then at the end, when we do the Q&A after the presentation, we will not be recording that. So you can send all your inquiries at any time during the event, and then we will get to those as they come in. We will also provide additional information and resources in the chat, but please reserve the Q&A panel for your questions. So I'm Therese Bacon, and I'll be your facilitator this afternoon. If you have any concerns or technology issues, I invite you to reach out to me in the chat. Again, please reserve your questions for the Q&A. Today, we have a very knowledgeable guest joining us to present on fast-tracking your debt payoff. Allow me to introduce our host, Catherine Wall, who works as a Partner Experience Manager for GreenPath Financial Wellness. GreenPath is a proud partner of the credit union and has been in business for over 60 years. They're a national and accredited nonprofit organization with an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, who aim to help their clients achieve financial wellness and stability. Welcome, Catherine, and thank you so much for joining us today. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience, tell us a little bit about your position with GreenPath, and then we can lead right into your presentation this afternoon.
Thank you so much. I'd love to do that. So as Therese mentioned, my name is Catherine Wall. I'm a Partner Experience Manager for GreenPath. I will say this is my second career. I'm an engineer by discipline, but this is my passion job. I basically work with a lot of our credit union partners to bring financial wellness to their members. And this is a great example of doing just that type of work. I will say that my job here at GreenPath, I think as happens for a lot of people, was really motivated by my family experience. Ironically, I'm an engineer. I spreadsheets up the gazoo. My younger sister struggles to balance a checkbook. And I will say as a family, I'm one of 7. So 6 of us were bailing her out time after time after time, really enabling the behavior, never addressing the real issue that she was going through. And sadly, eventually she did end up in a foreclosure and a bankruptcy. And I do count myself as part of the problem there because we enabled it. We never really helped her address the key issue. So first off, I want to applaud you for coming today. You may be here because you have a family member, such as myself, who needed some help and you're looking for that. It may be yourself. And so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about strategies for fast-tracking your debt payoff. And the first thing I will say is you're not alone. A lot of people are struggling at this time. Inflation really impacted spending plans. People had a break from student loan payments, and those have come back online, and they're struggling to fit those into their budgets. Some people were off work through the pandemic and used credit cards to get by, and they built up balances that they're now struggling to get paid down because of the high interest rates. So we certainly appreciate that a lot of people need this information. And again, I applaud you for attending today. So our agenda, the 3 items, basically we're going to be, take a look at getting prepared. What do you need to prepare to get this debt paid down? We're going to look at the strategies, what steps you need to take as part of that preparation. We're then going to look at the different options. Every situation is unique. Your family is unique. It's how do you find the best option that is going to be applicable for your situation? So we're going to explore different options, and we're going to talk about pros and cons. And hopefully that discussion will help kind of sort things for you in your mind. And then obviously, once we've kind of talked through those options, we're going to have a little session about tips to stay on track. Typically, most people don't get into debt overnight. It's been a process, and it could have been a process of years in the making. So sometimes this can take months to years to resolve. And we just want you to know that there are some strategies for keeping on track. Now, mentioning that time, I certainly don't want you to be discouraged. Truly. I will say for most situations, once you have a workout, that option that's going to work best for you in plan, once you get it started, it becomes much easier. The key focus at the beginning, though, is what is your why? So for those of you who are attending the presentation today, I would love for you to just drop into the chat, you know, why might somebody be looking to fast track that debt payoff? You don't have to speak your personal situation, but if you want to share your personal situation, that's great. But just why might somebody want to fast track their debt payoff? And as we get those responses coming through the chat, I want to mention how important it is. I've used a little engine on this slide because that engine, when we see the steam engine start to pull, from scratch, start to move on the track, it takes a lot of energy initially. It's very slow to start. Once it's in motion, it sails along. And so this why is going to be the engine that's going to drive that initial momentum, if you will, that initial energy to get you on track. And Paige, I appreciate you response, reducing stress. I will tell you, I counseled at GreenPath, and quite often that was an answer. It wasn't about the money side of it. It was the stress of having to deal with these payments. Another response here about being debt-free in retirement. Many people carry credit card debt for a number of years, but then going into retirement, they recognize their income is going to reduce and they may not have the money in their spending plan to make all of those payments. As she mentioned, stop living paycheck to paycheck. Absolutely. So these are all great whys. And I would say that when we think about this, write down your why and write down some of the emotions that go with that why. One of the things we recognize with stress can impact our relationships. It can impact family dynamics. We can become short-tempered because we're stressed. We might not be sleeping because of the stress, and that makes it even more difficult to be cordial sometimes. So, think about writing this down and writing down the emotions as well that go with it, because I think that's what will keep you focused. And once you have that why, write multiple copies, put one on the bathroom window, one on the refrigerator door, wherever it is that can keep it front of mind to help win those initial weeks in terms of making this kind of behavior change. Now, that said, what we want to do now is kind of transition into you getting prepared to tackle your debt. There are some very specific steps that you want to take in order to start handling your debt. So let's talk about the first one. And the first one is getting a clear understanding of your current financial situation. Now, I appreciate this can feel a little intimidating, perhaps even a little scary, but it is imperative to your debt-free success. And again, this is where having that why clearly written down with a good goal to carry you forward will give you the courage to take this step. So knowing where you currently stand is really going to help you set clear and realistic goals. And it's going to help you evaluate those options that we're going to talk about more confidently. You've obviously got to start by making a list of all the income that you have. And that's going to include anything you can count on to come in consistently. So your regular 40-hour paycheck, child support, Social Security. Note, money that you receive, maybe overtime, things of that nature, I wouldn't encourage you to include that money in this income initially, because this needs to be something that is consistent. And overtime, not always. It's the same with bonuses. We can't always bank on those to come in. So make sure you're not including the overtime unless it is guaranteed to be consistent. If for the last 2-3 years you've always had this consistent overtime, then obviously that's something that you can include. You also want to make sure that you don't include income that can vary significantly or anything that's unreliable. So I mentioned the bonuses, okay? Inconsistent income like overtime and side hustles can be used, though, as extra money to help you reach your goals quicker. And we're going to talk about how you can use these funds in a very effective way to get quick wins. Again, we don't want to include that as part of your regular budget unless it's guaranteed. Now, we want to make sure, review your checking and savings account balances so you know exactly where you stand. Do you have emergency savings and things of that nature? Make a complete and total list. The next is going to be important to understand where your money is currently going. So review your statements to make a detailed list of your monthly bills and payment obligations, as well as anything else your money consistently goes to. Things like food, gas, childcare, entertainment, subscriptions, any kind of other miscellaneous expenses. With the credit union, you can go in and look in the app and pull all your transactions. Look at the credit card statements, pull those transactions, because sometimes we human beings are not honest with ourselves. We can kind of overgloss some of these expenses that we might have because well, that's not really a regular expense because it was just a one-off. Well, Therese was talking about having a new pet. If you have a pet, there's likely to be vet bills. So we need to include those expenses. So we want to make sure we're covering everything. So ideally, take a look back over a few months to get an accurate representation of where the average amount you spend in each area. So obviously, we're in Michigan. It's got pretty cool today. The furnaces are running. Our heating bills are going to be high in the winter. If we're in the summer, we're not a Little Rock, Arkansas, where our conditioners are running 24/7 in the summer. So, maybe those other bills go down. So just take a look to make sure you have some good averages. And again, online banking options will provide a breakdown by category. So you may have even had statements or email messages from your credit card companies and other your financial institution to say your annual statement is due or your annual report is due. So you can actually go and pull that and have a whole year's worth of transactions. And again, having that why, this might seem a little daunting, having that why of waking up debt-free in, even if it's 2 years from now, how would I feel if I woke up and I had no debt? How would I feel? I'd feel amazing. Use that energy to take you through this activity, and don't try and do everything all at once and it become overwhelming. Okay, something to consider. I'm also going to talk about GreenPath. If you're not really sure about where your money's going, GreenPath will do and help you do a financial assessment, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on the back end of the presentation today. So we've got all of our income. We've got a list of those transactions and things of that nature. We need to know now how much debt do we truly have. And you want to include everything. So you can pull copies of your credit reports to get copies of everything on the credit report. But you also need to think about, are there any family debts outstanding? Sometimes when we started to struggle, like I say, my sister started to struggle, there was a few IOUs out there for the family. Now, we weren't necessarily expecting to get some of that money back, but there were other things that she did need to pay back. So for yourselves, making a list of all of those debts that you owe is really important. Now, the things you want to consider as you're making this list, you need to know who you owe exactly how much, what are the current interest rates, what are the current minimum monthly payments that you need to make, and if there is anything past due. If something is past due, we want to highlight this because obviously if it's past due, it's negatively impacting your credit. So that's something that we want to know about and focus on so we can address that. So again, now we want to take a look at those debts. So pull those credit reports. Go to the 3 different bureaus. There's TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. So you can see on the slide there, annualcreditreport.com is the website you want to go to get these. If by some chance you put something in the search bar of the internet and it comes up and it's trying to charge you a fee, you're in the wrong place. Annualcreditreport.com does not charge a fee. It is just going to allow you to pull a copy of the credit report. It's not going to tell you the score, okay? But you can get those scores from other financial institutions do offer your score typically. So that's not something you need to worry about. But again, take a copy of all of these credit reports so that you can then have everything together in one place. So we've prepared, we've got our list, we've got everything we need. Any questions, Therese, in the chat at this point, in the Q&A, if anybody has any questions so far about what we've spoken of?
Yep, nothing yet.
Perfect. All righty. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about options. So you should now know how much I've got coming in, how much is obligated to go out for my living expenses, and how much I have left in that budget in order to address my debt. And I should have a good list of all of the debts that I owe, my minimum payments, and everything of that nature. So what we want to do now is talk about what are the options available to getting out of debt? And there are several, and that's a good thing. So know you do have options when we look at this. And again, every financial situation is unique, and taking these steps to get prepared is so important because it is going to help you now determine which of these options to pay off debt may or may not work for you. So again, there's no cut and dried solution that's guaranteed to work best for everybody. And there are pros and cons to every option that you should weigh. They need to be weighed for your personal circumstances. Again, I just want to recognize, I know getting rid of debt can feel daunting, and perhaps for some people, it feels like it's an impossible task, but it can be hard to know what options are even available to you, not to mention the added pressure of trying to determine what's legitimate versus a scam. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at these different options. What I would suggest is we go through, if you have any questions, start popping those into the Q&A. Therese, if you want to keep an eye out on those and maybe ask if it seems appropriate, we can answer those questions as we go through. I will say when I've attended webinars, there's nothing worse than having a question unanswered in the back of my mind because it distracts me from the content going forward. So if you do have something that comes to mind, please don't hesitate to put something in the Q&A. All right, so let's move into taking a look at these different options and obviously look at how might being debt-free become realistic for you. So the 5 options we're going to cover today, okay? 5 main topics in terms of getting out of debt. Doing it on your own, debt consolidation loans, debt settlement, aka debt relief, you might see it advertised on the internet or the TV, bankruptcy, and debt management plans. For those who've never heard of a debt management plan, that is a program that's offered only by non-profit financial education and counseling organizations. So we're going to cover all of these 5. So the first one we're going to talk about is on your own. And for some people, if they can realign their spending and they can get focused on some of these and create a really good plan to get their debt paid off, this can work for a lot of people. The chances are, you may have already tried to pay this debt off on your own, but sometimes if you don't have a solid plan, success can be limited. The key here is if you have money left over in your budget, a strategy to pay down the debt may be as simple as increasing the monthly payments, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at what we call the debt snowball. The debt snowball, it's basically a strategy where you're paying off your debts in order of the smallest to largest balance. It's called the snowball because we think of a snowball going down the hill, it gains momentum. And this is what happens with the debt snowball. It's very effective because it works with our humanness, because by going for the smallest balance first, what I'm doing is, and I'll show you an example in the next couple of slides, I'm going to be making my minimum payment on all of my credit card debts, or all of my debts rather, with the exception of the lowest balance. That extra money that I might have found in my spending plan, right? Maybe I used to always buy lunch when I went to work, at work every day. Now I'm going to brown bag, and I've got an extra $50 a month I can use towards paying down that debt. I'm going to put that extra $50 against the minimum payment for that smallest debt until I get that debt paid off. And because I'm paying much more than the minimum payment, it's going to accelerate that payoff. It's going to get paid off quicker, and I have a quick win. As humans, this is really important for us. So let me kind of give you an idea of the debt snowball. So this is a slide. Oops, Daisy, that kind of did a bit of a jump. Let me go back. So the debt snowball. What we've done is we've got a lot of different debts, and we've basically ordered them, just listed them out, okay? And I've got these currently. You can see the various interest rates, you can see the minimum payments and the balances. With the debt snowball, again, think about the snowball rolling down the hill, gaining momentum. At top of the hill, it's the smallest. And I'm so sorry, it keeps jumping. So what I've done now is I've reordered those debts. And so you can see the medical debt is the smallest balance at $500. That is number 1. And I've got a minimum payment of $20. The interest rate's 5%. I'm not going to worry about these rates over here. I'm going to throw my extra and this could be that $50, you may find an extra $100 in your spending plan to throw at this debt. If you had an extra $100, this debt is going to be paid off in 4 months. Just under, between 4 and 5 months, this debt will be paid off. You then start moving all of that extra money. The $120 that you were paying towards this lowest balance debt now goes to the second lowest balance debt. So this, I would now be paying $156 towards the $900 debt. So you can see how this accelerates that repayment. And again, snowball rolling down the hill. This snowball is getting bigger. What is the snowball representing? It's representing the payment that I'm using against that lowest debt. So every time this is going to keep building. Snowball is incredibly powerful. It really works with our psychology. But there is a different system to getting the debt paid off on your own, and that's the debt avalanche. The debt avalanche actually works using interest rates. Now, I will tell you, engineer, math person, I do not like interest. I am a pay off the highest interest rate first kind of gal. I do not want to be paying interest if I can avoid it. The challenge with the debt avalanche for a lot of people is, let me give you an example of what this looks like. I would be paying the highest interest rate instead of the lowest balance. So when we go back to the example I had, and I'm so sorry, I don't know why it's jumping. If you look at the size of some of these debts, if we're doing the avalanche, we're looking at the highest interest rates, that's 26%, and that's our highest balance. So when we order these for the avalanche, that's what it's going to take. It's going to have that $6,000 balance first. Now, if I found the extra $100, that means I'm going to be paying $340 against this first debt. Can you see how that's going to take a much longer period of time to get this debt paid off? And sometimes psychologically, it can feel like we're not making progress. And that can disincentivize people. So it's really important to know your psychology. Now, if you're kind of like me and you don't like paying that interest, seeing that interest payment every month is just so difficult, then maybe what you do is you start with the avalanche. But if you start to feel yourself becoming disenfranchised, disincentivized, you can switch and do the snowball. There's nothing to stop you. This is your plan, you're choosing. Now, when it comes to those debt repayment options, Thanks Therese has put in a link to an online learning class about different debt repayment options, which one is right for me. So you can literally go and take a look at these. After we finished out today, you can go to this free online website. This is the credit union's GreenPath online website, and you can go and do these classes for free. You will need to register, no problem, but you can then go in and take these different courses. Now, the other option that you have, in terms of handling it on your own, we've talked about doing the snowball, we've talked about the avalanche. Maybe you haven't found a lot of money in your spending plan that you can use to against these types of plans. So maybe you need some assistance on those minimum payments. Well, one of the options you have is reaching out to your creditors and asking if they have any internal hardship programs, or maybe promotions to help you lower your interest rates, stop any overdraft fee or over limit fees or late fees, and allow you to get back on track. Now, one of the things I would encourage if you're going to speak with a creditor, it can be hard to listen to yourself, having to explain, why do you need assistance? It can be hard. So this is what I would encourage you to do. First off, you need to understand, what can you afford to pay? So that early work that we talked about in terms of preparation, knowing, do you have some extra dollars in your spending plan? If not, what payment can you make? If the minimum payment for this particular creditor is $200, you're struggling to make that $200, what can you do? Can you do $175? Is that something that you can commit to? You need to know that before you call the creditor. This is what you say when you call the creditor. Phone their regular phone number. When the first person answers the phone, ask that individual, do they have the authority or permission to reduce your interest rate or payment? And they will say no, typically speaking, because in order to have that minimum payment reduced or have that interest rate reduced, you're going to be needing to talk to the resolutions department. What you do when they say no is you say, can you transfer me to the person who can? So you don't have to go into explaining why you need this, taking up 20 minutes of your lunch hour just to get to the right person. Just simple, do you have the authority to reduce my interest rate or minimum payment on this debt today? And they say no, can you transfer me to the person who has or who can? Once you've done that, you want to make a record. Who are you speaking with? Get a name. They may give you a last name, or they may give you a reference or a phone number or an extension number. Make sure you make a record. Make sure that you understand if they are going to offer you a hardship, what is that? What are the requirements? They may need to see some information from you. They may send you a document that you may have to sign and return. You need to make sure you write down everything that's required. So you make sure that you meet the requirements. They may also allow you this hardship for a certain period of time. That's very important to make a record of that. Know when does that expire, so that you can be sure that you're starting to get back on track before that hardship expires. Don't be deterred from speaking with creditors. They will assist you, if there is an opportunity to do so. So don't be afraid to make that phone call. Now, let's talk about pros and cons of managing the debt on your own. Obviously, every option has got unique pros and cons, and so we're going to look at this with every option we discussed today. So pros of all of these three options in terms of working this on your own is there's no financial cost to implement them. It's all within your control. You're the master of the ship here. So there's no cost associated with this. Typically, you won't have to apply for anything. You're not going to have to be worried that your credit isn't going to be good enough or anything of that nature. Obviously, some of the options we're going to talk about today are going to be reliant on credit. This instance of managing things on your own, this is not going to be impacted by your current credit score. Now, some creditors may need information from you to determine if they can offer a hardship program. So they may want to know why you are struggling. Did you have a loss of income? Was there a medical issue that stopped you making payments? Sometimes they have those types of criteria, so to speak. But typically, it's not as in-depth as having to apply for a loan or anything of that nature. So again, snowball and avalanche, all within your control. Typically, we'll say, if these are done as intended, these options typically will have little or no negative impact on credit. And they may allow you to keep your accounts open if that is your goal. So now you do want to be sure about asking that when you pursue the hardship. So be sure that, if you are applying for a hardship, make sure again, what might be the terms and conditions. Are they going to want to close the account? Just make sure you make a record of that. It's unusual for them to close the account for the hardship. But again, you need to know that. So typically no negative impact to credit. But what I will say is as you start repaying your debt, so with the snowball, the avalanche, as you're paying your debts down, your debt levels are going down, you've got consistent paid on time history, actually it's going to improve your credit. Your credit is going to build, which is a great thing. Now, in terms of the other side of this, there is self-accountability. You have to follow the plan. This is one of the challenges of tackling that on your own. You're going to need strict self-accountability to follow through with the constant pulls all around spending your money. If you have young children and they need certain things, it's hard to say no sometimes. Sometimes we've had a really busy, exhausting day, and it seems so easy to, pick up dinner on the way home. Maybe we can't do that when we're tackling these debts on our own. So this is one of the challenges. It is going to be that commitment. You're going to have to be have that self-accountability. The other part is the time commitment. Obviously, there is some time commitment up front in order to get these things kicked off. Doing that assessment. Where are you today? Working out the best plan, snowball or avalanche, and then obviously you're going to have to make changes to payments as you go forward. So there's a time commitment. So generally speaking, certainly good options. And if you're interested in exploring these further, you want a little more information and more in-depth information, you can do that Learning Lab course where there's more information about the snowball and the avalanche as well. So something to consider as well, if you're considering reaching out to the creditors for hardship programs, that's a time commitment as well. That's another thing to consider. You may have to sort of block some time specifically. It can take a little time to go through these conversations, and you may have to make multiple calls. So something else to consider. Alrighty. Before we go on to our next option, which is the debt consolidation loan, do we have any questions? So let me ask our audience, if you're considering if you were going to use the snowball or the avalanche, which would be your preference? Because I think that's kind of interesting seeing, who do we have on the call today? Okay. Ashley's a snowball kind of person. Okay. And I would say, actually, it is a great system. It really is for keeping people engaged and motivated. All right. Avalanche, snowball hasn't worked for me. Okay. I would struggle with the interest. I will say I would definitely be an avalanche kind of person. I would see saving that interest as a motivator. But that's again, we're all very different. And what motivates one person doesn't motivate another. So know thyself is really important here. All right, so let's talk about the debt consolidation loan. For many of us, there is no money left over each month. Increasing payments isn't on the cards, especially for people who are barely breaking even or perhaps running short each month. And there are a lot of people who are going through this currently with inflation, with the student loan payments starting. It's challenging. But the good news is there are other options. And this number 2 option, the debt consolidation loan, could be one. The debt consolidation can come in many different forms. The goal here is to borrow money, use that money to pay off other debts, and then have one monthly payment to one lender instead of sending multiple payments to multiple creditors. And the key focus here is what we're looking to do with that debt consolidation loan is reduce our interest cost. We're looking to get a lower interest rate versus the interest that we might be paying, especially those credit card interest rates. I currently saw one at 34.99 for one of our clients. Wow. So if I can get a consolidation loan, even if it's low double digits, that's going to save me a lot of money. Typically, we're really looking to, I would say for the consolidation loan, you can consolidate 2 different types of debt. One is the unsecured debt. So if you have credit cards and things of that nature, you can consolidate that. And that loan requires no collateral. Okay. But there is also a secured loan. The secured loan means you're putting something of value, like your home, you're putting that up as collateral in case you default. So in the instance, quite often a secured loan is like to have a lower interest, but there's a lower interest because there's lower risk to the borrower, to the creditor rather, because they have a guarantee by way of an asset to back that loan. So it could be a vehicle, it could be your home. Now, one of the really important things here is if you're using collateral, it is imperative that you understand all the terms and you understand what is at risk if something happens and you're unable to make payments and you fall behind. It's very important here. So I will say as a counseling agency, we don't like to see unsecured debt going secured. We don't like people to consolidate credit card debt and use their vehicle as collateral, only because they're just putting that asset at risk. However, again, everybody's different. That may be something that you need to do. And Teresa's actually put a link into the chat there. So if you want to explore the consolidation loan option at the credit union, you've got a link there that you can use to kind of click on and just explore. So the pros of the consolidation loan, okay, it's one fixed payment, right? Typically for the length of the time of the loan, whatever that term may be. It's a fixed term. Depending on the amount of indebtedness, it could be 24 months, it could be 36, it could be longer, okay? But it's one payment to one creditor. Now, bearing in mind, several people talked about, hey, one of the benefits of getting out of debt, the reason I want to be out of debt, or I want to be debt-free, is the reduction in stress. This is one key component that can reduce stress. If I'm only having to make one payment instead of maybe I currently have 10 payments I'm making, that can absolutely reduce my stress. So certainly something to consider in that regard. Now, the other side of that is obviously the interest rate. The goal of getting the consolidation loan is typically to lock in a lower interest rate. So therefore, ideally, you're going to get a lower monthly payment than the previous payments combined. So obviously a very big pro, especially as we talked about, maybe people are running a little short in their budget. I don't have extra funds to do snowball or avalanche. In fact, actually, I need to reduce my expenses because my budget isn't currently working with the current minimum payments. This can be a good option. Okay. However, these credit accounts, if you use the consolidation loans, you have to look at the different options. Typically, most often when financial institutions do consolidation loans, they don't close the accounts, but it's worth checking just in case they do. But that's another, for a benefit for some people, they like to have those credit cards remain open with the zero balance just because they feel it's their safety net. However, this could also be a con. Because if you don't stop using the accounts, you can actually acquire more debt and suddenly find yourself with the consolidation loan payment and new credit card minimum payments. So, it's again, yourself, know thyself. Will you be tempted to continue to use those cards? And if you feel you would be, maybe you close some of them, some of the newer cards you've had open, because the newer cards, if you close them, will have less negative impact on your credit. Maybe you close some of those younger cards to give yourself less ability to get yourself back into debt. Now, one of the things you have to consider, though, with the consolidation loan on this flip side is it is a loan. And typically, you're going to have to apply for the loan. And that's going to have to go through underwriting. There's going to be an approval process. They are going to look at your income. They're going to look at the assets. They're going to look at your employment history and your credit and the amount of debt you have compared to your income. All of these factors are going to be taken into consideration. So can you get through the approval? That's going to be the number one. The other side you have to consider as well is there will be impact to credit because you are taking on this debt in the short term. There will be a little negative impact because you do have another line of credit. So it can have a negative impact because there's going to be a new acquiry and there's going to be a new account. Now, again, we did talk about the other side of this. The other con associated with this is if you do secure the loan, obviously this is an important thing to weigh. If you secure the loan with some kind of collateral, your house or your vehicle, what is the risk you're taking? Because if you cannot afford these payments and you fall behind, you could lose the vehicle, you could lose the home. And I know that sounds very daunting. So, one of the ways you can mitigate this is, do I have some savings I can put aside so I have a number of months worth of payments just in case? That's a way you can in some respects mitigate this risk. So something to consider that, as you go through this. Alrighty, so we've covered paying on your own and we've covered the debt consolidation. We're next going to roll into debt settlement. Before we do that, any questions about the debt consolidation loan? Alrighty. So again, just pop the questions in as we go. So what we want to do now is we want to look at debt settlement. Now, I'm going to be very upfront. I am not a fan. However, there is a place for debt settlement for some individuals, right? So my bias aside, I'm trying to give you an independent view of the debt settlement, okay? Sometimes you might hear this reference as debt relief. You may see this on the internet, if you search for debt help, you're more likely to come up with, a debt settlement company's ad. You may see these as ads on the billboard and on the highway. Another place you'll see adverts of debt settlement is on the TV late at night. And that's because they know people are stressing. They can't sleep because they're worried about their debts and they're up watching the TV. And we'll see these ads on the television. And the type of ad you might see is the credit card companies don't want you to know, but you don't have to pay all of your debt. You can pay off your debt 50 cents on the dollar. And that is their sales pitch. And yes, some creditors will settle debts, but we have to understand there are pros and cons associated with this type of situation. Now, I also want to point out that you can settle a debt on your own. You don't have to use a third party. So if you were struggling with a particular debt and maybe you get a really good tax refund you weren't expecting, you could possibly use those tax refund dollars to do a settlement and ask a creditor to take 50 cents on the dollar. That is an option. Again, there are consequences to this type of thing. So I would say, in general, this is a kind of solution that's typically best used for someone who's working on cleaning up debts after it's already in collections. Although, it is sometimes used by people who do have open accounts. So let me kind of give you that general description. It's basically a negotiation between a creditor and a borrower to pay back a portion of the outstanding debt, while the remainder of the debt is forgiven. For example, you might owe $5,000 on a debt, and the creditor could agree to a settlement where you pay $3,500, and the $1,500 would be forgiven. That is the settlement side of it. Now, I mentioned debt settlement or debt relief companies, but again, you can choose to attempt to negotiate a settlement on your own. It is entirely up to the creditor's discretion if they are willing to negotiate, and if they are, what that settlement offer could look like. It will typically be much easier, again, like I say, if you have those funds ready to negotiate and pay immediately. So you have the funds, maybe from a tax refund or something of that nature. It also is a great help if the account is already past due. Now, please understand, I am not encouraging you to let your debts go past due in order to do a settlement. Sadly, that is what the settlement companies do encourage you to do, but there are a lot of consequences to that type of thing. So, but typically, creditors are more likely going to negotiate if things are past due. Now, one of the things I will also say is, if you are looking to obtain a settlement yourself, you want to make sure you get those offers in writing, and you also want to know how will they report this payment on your credit report. And you can negotiate that too. Because obviously, if it goes on your credit report as a settlement, not paid in full, it will have a negative impact on credit. So it's something that you need to consider. Now, obviously, the pros, if you did owe $5,000 and they settle for $3,500, yeah, you can save money. One of the things I will say that is shocking for a lot of people who try to use a third party to do debt settlement is they don't save anywhere near what they thought they were going to save, because the settlement company is going to charge money too. By the time the debt is finally settled, the debt can actually be much higher, because typically when you work with a third party, remember I said, the settlement company is or the creditor is more likely to settle if the debt is past due. The settlement company will not be making payments. You will be sending payments to the settlement company. They're not going to be forwarding those payments immediately to the creditor. They're going to be saving them in an escrow account so they can basically build a pot of money they can use for negotiation. Every month that goes by that your debt is not paid, the balance increases, the interest is added, maybe late fees are added. So when it comes to the savings, it's not unusual for most people to say, I didn't save anything like I thought I was going to save, because the balances were much higher when they were finally settled. So again, if you have money yourself, that can be mitigated somewhat, but just something that you need to consider. If you do enter into a payment plan, to work with a settlement company. One of the pros is typically it may be a lower amount, a lower payment amount. You'll be sending, one payment to that one creditor or to the settlement company. Again, you're not going to be having to make multiple payments. You're not going to have to keep track of those. So this can be seen as a pro in terms of, making it easy to handle. It can help resolve collection balances quicker. A settlement can be a good option for that. I don't have the full balance, but because it's already in collections, the creditor, maybe they're concerned you may go to a bankruptcy. So this is an opportunity for them to at least get something back. So these things can get cleaned up a little quicker. Again, the damage is already on your credit report because the account is in collections, but there may still be a little bit more negative impact. But you are going to be paying that debt off. So over time, credit will then start to rebuild. Now, this also can be, a way to avoid, that last resort options of non-payment or bankruptcy. I can't pay everything. I don't have enough. I do want to get these debts dealt with. So maybe this is an option. The option of, I say, not last resort, but, the penultimate option to go for if I don't have the funds in my budget. However, the things to consider with debt settlement, and this is why, and again, I'm going to emphasize this is Catherine Wall's opinion, not GreenPath's opinion, as to why I am not a fan of debt settlement. It really is up to the creditor's discretion if they're willing to negotiate a settlement. So you can have an agreement with a third party that party is going to charge you money, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the interim, but or in a little minute or so. But you're sending payments to this settlement company, and you may have sent those payments for months. And when it comes to the settlement, the creditor is not interested in settling. Instead, they choose to take you to court. They have that right. And if they take you to court, it's possible that they can get a judgment of a garnishment against you. And then your wages are garnished. And depending on the state, that can be a significant amount of money. A lot of people, when they're talking to a settlement company, they're not hearing those really important pieces of information. They think, I'm sending my money to this company. There goes this company is making payments to my creditors. That is not the case. So if you are in a program and you're currently thinking that they are making payments, check your statements. Go online and check your statements to make sure payments are going and being applied against the debt. If they are not, the chances are it's a settlement and you may want to take some other advice. And we'll talk about calling GreenPath again in a little while. But again, the creditor doesn't have to accept a settlement. And what you'll find in the settlement agreements, it will literally say in there, somewhere in the small print, that the settlement company, and I'll say, reserves the right to remove a debt from the plan. They have the right. Okay, you signed the settlement agreement, but this creditor ABC, they won't work with us. We're just going to remove them from the plan. So now you have to deal with creditor ABC. So it's not always a clean sort of fix. So the other thing to consider, if you are including accounts that are still open and active into a debt settlement program, those accounts typically fall past due very quickly. If you're working with a settlement company, again, they're trying to negotiate with this creditor. The creditor is more likely to accept, a lower payment, a settlement amount, if the accounts are past due. And this is how they get leverage. So that settlement company, again, they're going to hang on to your payments until a certain balance is reached in your account, at which point they're going to reach out to the first creditor in your list, and they're going to attempt to negotiate. Now, this is only one creditor. If you've got 5, they may wait once to talk to the first one. Only once they've dealt with the first one do they go on to the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5. So you can see these other creditors are still not seeing any kind of payments. And again, you've got to remember, it's up to the creditor's discretion to whether they will agree. Now, in the meantime, these accounts are going to be falling past due because no payments are going to be typically made until enough money is accumulated to offer that settlement. And as this happens, the accounts will typically get closed. Additional late fees and interest is going to accumulate, and you'll likely receive numerous collection calls because your creditors are typically left in the dark about this process. You can see why Catherine Wall is not a fan of this company. And I will say part of my my negative opinion is because I've spoken with clients, who've called GreenPath, who all of a sudden they found themselves being garnished. They thought they were making payments to their creditors. They really didn't understand how the settlement program worked. And so they finally, all of a sudden, they now have this garnishment, and it's making their life incredibly difficult. So yeah, this is where I kind of feel very strongly about this. So it obviously is going to impact credit, because as those payments start falling past due and the balances are going to increase with the interest and fees, it's going to lead to negative impact on the credit score. And those, obviously, payment history and balances are the two largest factors that impact your credit. Now, if the accounts fall far enough past due, the creditor may send it to collections and/or pursue legal action to attempt to collect the balance owed. So if you are pursuing debt settlement, if you've considered it, you've got to pay close attention to any mail you receive. And if you get your statements online, you've got to be logging in and taking a look at these. And you have to take immediate action on any legal notices or court summons. So this may even actually cost you more over time, because while the upfront negotiating, you're negotiating a settled balance, it sounds like a good way to save money. When you're working with a settlement company, it will lead to them charging you fees. Plus, again, as we've discussed, you've got the additional fees, the interest charge on the past due balances. And if the creditor does not agree to negotiate a settlement, you're going to be on the hook for the entire higher balance. If your credit score suffers as well, this can lead to future credit being more expensive. So it may be at this point where even if you were considering a debt consolidation, you may not be able to get one because your credit has been impacted. And so you wouldn't get through underwriting. So obviously, a lot of negative impacts to doing this. I will also say one of the final things is there's a potential tax liability. Did you know that Uncle Sam sees that forgiven debt? We mentioned the example, I owe 5,000, I give them 3,500, they waive the 1,500. Uncle Sam, the IRS, sees that $1,500 as income, and they will expect you to pay taxes on that. You will receive a 1099 at the beginning of the following year, and there could be a tax liability. Now, I will say if you're lower income, it's important to talk to a tax professional. I am not a tax professional, so I cannot give advice on this specifically. So I would highly recommend speaking to a tax professional to understand what that tax liability will be. So to just kind of finish out, there is a time and a place that debt settlement can make sense. If I've come into a lump sum of money, I've got some collections accounts, I just want to get my credit cleaned up because maybe I want to buy a home, in the future, but I've got all these collections and it's really looking bad on my credit. Might I use settlement in that situation? Yeah, there may be an opportunity there. But for most people, the majority of people, I would say debt settlement is not a good option. Now, any questions? Trace, do you see any questions about the debt settlement at all?
Nothing's popped through yet, so you must be explaining everything very well. No one has any questions.
All righty. So let us go to bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is our option number 4. Now, I do want to start by saying I am not an attorney. I cannot give legal advice, okay? Why do I mention that? Well, because bankruptcy is actually a legal process through which people who cannot repay their debts to creditors, they may seek relief from some or all of those debts. Now, although you can file a bankruptcy without an attorney, it's typically not recommended. There are nuances to bankruptcy that, really do need an attorney's eye. Typically, I would say bankruptcy should be reserved as a last resort after exploring all the other options, because it is going to have significant impact. There are 2 main types of personal bankruptcy. There is a Chapter 13, which basically does typically require some repayment. If you have assets, if you have equity in your home, you may be required to pay back some of the debts through this Chapter 13 repayment plan. So this is going to be mandated by the court. There will be a trustee, and you're going to be having to make payments. There is a Chapter 7. Chapter 7 typically allows all the debts to be discharged without requiring payment. Again, talking with an attorney can help you understand which type you may be eligible for. Many bankruptcy attorneys will offer a free initial consultation to help you get some clarity on what filing bankruptcy may look like for you. So I would make a point of just asking them, do they do that free consultation? In terms of the pros, there are pros and cons, like in any situation. A pro would be that filing bankruptcy may be able to stop adverse action, including garnishment. We've talked about garnishment. It could may stop adverse action like a repossession of a vehicle or foreclosure of a home. Now, again, I'm not an attorney. You need to seek legal advice to know if this would be applicable in your situation. But I will say, during the housing crisis, 2008 to 2010, GreenPath spoke with a lot of people who ended up using a bankruptcy to avoid their homes being foreclosed on because, they were underwater and they were struggling with payments. But the key here is you've got to seek legal advice if this is something that you're facing. Bankruptcy may stop those collection calls and provide some relief there as well. You may, depending on the terms of the bankruptcy, you may end up paying out less to the creditors than you would with other options. That's something to consider. Now, things to consider on the cons side. There are upfront expenses involved. Typically, filing bankruptcy involves attorneys and court fees, and that must be paid. Really weigh, and you've got to weigh this carefully, especially if you're pursuing a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, as there are additional fees on top of them when you're still repaying some of the debt. There are extra fees that go into, those payments. So that's something you have to really consider. Something also, your income and assets may have an impact on your ability to file and have debts discharged. I will say when I counseled, I had people speak with me and they heard their neighbor had done a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. All the debts were wiped out. They thought this was amazing. They wanted to do this too. They didn't appreciate that having assets and having good income can actually make a difference where those debts are not completely forgiven and they have to start making the repayments. The other final thing to consider in this, or not just the final thing, but another thing to consider, some of these debts are not able to be included or discharged in a bankruptcy. So the government doesn't like to have their tax debts discharged in a bankruptcy. Student loans, a very, very tiny percentage of debts would be discharged through bankruptcy for student loans. Typically speaking, and again, I'm not an attorney, I cannot give legal advice, but typically student loans cannot be included in bankruptcy. The other side is the impact can be up to 10 years. This will stay on your credit report. Now, I will, for mention that it's the last 2-3 years of activity is going to weigh most heavily on your account. So over time, the impact of the bankruptcy will lessen, but it will remain on your credit report for up to 10 years, depending on the type of bankruptcy that you file. So very much, this is something that you really need to consider. One of the, I was listening to a person talk yesterday, and they said, you know what, I was considering a bankruptcy. Actually, my parents said no. Their parents actually sent them to GreenPath. So this will kind of roll us into our next topic. But when they graduated from college, had they done the bankruptcy, they eventually worked for financial institutions. And one of the things they had to recognize is had they filed the bankruptcy, they would not have got the job that they had applied for going out of college had they filed the bankruptcy. It would have precluded them from that career path. So things to consider. I'm assuming there's no questions at this point. We can roll into our next topic. All righty. Our final topic, the debt management plan. Again, I am unashamedly biased when it comes to GreenPath. GreenPath is one of the nonprofit financial counseling and education companies that can offer a debt management plan. I wish I had known that this type of plan was available when my younger sister got into trouble. If we had this solution at the outset, she would never have got into the trouble that she did. So yes, I am biased on this particular workout, but I'm hoping that the information I share today will kind of give you a sense of why I feel so strongly that this is a great resolution for the right people. It's not for everybody. There are definite cons associated with this, but for certain individuals, this truly can be, and I know it sounds dramatic to say a lifesaver, but it truly can be. So I would say this is probably the least known option of the 5. And since, a lot of people are not aware of it, we really want to make sure we take a good dive into it. Debt management plans, again, typically are offered for unsecured debt like credit cards, collection accounts, and medical bills. In some cases, payday loans, personal loans, although these tend to be more case by case situations. Partners, any of our partners who partner with GreenPath, they offer this type of relationship because they want to support their members. Michigan State Federal MSUFCU work with GreenPath. They refer their members to talk to GreenPath about the debt management plan because they do see the power of it. So again, typically used for unsecured debts. It is a structured payment. So through the debt management plan, GreenPath creates a structured repayment plan to pay all the debts in full. Now, this is a real key component. Debts are repaid in full. We're going to reach out to creditors on your behalf. And potentially what we're looking to do is get lower interest rates and maybe things like get late fees waived. So these obviously, they have to be agreed by the creditor. And we know this at the outset. Unlike the settlement company, they'll wait months and months and months and months and months before they reach out to the creditor. When we first start working with an individual, we find out if the creditors are going to accept these plans because we send out a proposal asking them for these types of concessions. Now, what typically happens, the individual sends payments to GreenPath, and then GreenPath sends those payments to the creditor on their behalf every month until the balance is paid in full. And obviously, very different from the settlement company because we're not negotiating balances. It's simply the terms of the debt repayments that we're negotiating. And creditors are involved every step of the way. We send that proposal, they agree to a certain payment, they may actually request maybe a slightly higher payment. And if that's the case, then we work with the member to find those extra few dollars in their spending plan in order to make the payment a reality. Every month, the member's still going to get their statements and they're going to see these payments being paid. From the pro, if looking at the debt management plan, there's no minimum credit score. So unlike that consolidation loan, there's no minimum payment credit score required or approval requirements in terms of, unlike getting the loan. The thing about the debt management plan, though, we want to make sure that you have the money in your spending plan to make the payments. If you run a huge deficit, we wouldn't set you up on a debt management plan because we don't want to set you up for failure. But if we can find those, if we can build that spending plan and you have the funds there in order to make these payments, then absolutely the debt management plan can be a great tool. Balances are typically structured to repay within 3 to 5 years. So that's the great key here. We're getting people out of debt within 3 to 5 years. It also offers the benefit of getting money to one place. You make one deposit to GreenPath. So again, it's taking that stress out of living. We're just sending one payment to GreenPath. We're going to distribute those payments. It really then makes it so much easier than you trying to consolidate those payments, or rather you juggling multiple payments and due dates every month. Obviously, the credit concessions is one of the biggest pros. If we can get a reduction in interest rate, I mentioned having 34.99% interest. If we can get that interest rate down to 9.9, wow, can you imagine the savings in interest? This is really where we start to see the power of the plan. Now, every creditor has different terms that they can offer. So it really does vary creditor to creditor and what they may be able to offer. So don't be fixed on a given interest rate. It really is a matter of those those individual creditors, working with them. The goal here is to get these debts paid in full in 5 years. So things to consider when doing a debt management plan. Okay, there's always some cons. One of those cons is that those cards that you add to the plan will likely be closed. Okay, now, ironically, this can also be a pro because now you don't have the ability to go out and start building, more unsecured debt. So, having those cards closed, is a key to the debt management plan working. The credit is not going to significantly reduce your interest rate and allow you to keep spending on the card. I will also say there can be possible negative impact to the credit report. Now, if somebody has been past due on lots of accounts, and they're getting past due, they're seeing late fees and things of that nature, obviously their credit has already been negatively impacted. But if you have a good credit score, you could have a 700+ score, but just feel I'm not making headway on my debt. I need to find another solution. And maybe the debt management plan is the solution for you. Just know when accounts are closed, those, that is going to negatively impact credit. I will also say the first few payments on the plan, if you owed previously, your minimum payment was $200 and now it's $150. If you make that $150 payment for the first few months, it will be seen on your credit report as not paid in full. Because typically what creditors do is they want to make sure that you can handle this new payment consistently before they, what we call in the business, re-age your account. What that means is going forward, that $150 payment will be seen as on time in full. So it may be 3 months to re-age, it may be 6 months. You can, if you choose, to pay the extra $50 to the creditor to obviously reduce this negative impact. But no, there can be negative impact to the credit with the debt management plan early on. However, over time, you're going to be paying debts down, you're going to be making consistent payments on time in full, and that will then rebuild credit. I will say not all creditors do work with the debt management plan. So, that's something that we can tell you, though, right at the outset, if somebody will not accept, will not accept or provide concessions on the plan, that's something that you will know right at the outset. And we can actually provide coaching in how to handle those particular creditors. Typically, there can be a setup fee for setting up a debt management plan, and there can be a monthly maintenance fee. I don't want to go into a big deal about the fees, because one of the things I want to emphasize is that if you are saving lots and lots of money on the minimum payments, paying the fee, it's not a problem. And what you would want to do is do a financial assessment with GreenPath to really explore all of the options that might be appropriate for you to determine first if the debt settlement, if the debt management plan is going to be an option. So we just want you to maybe do that free financial assessment first to determine what makes most sense. Now, one of the things I want to do is I want to share with you a quick video about somebody who has covered the plan, who's doing a plan.
Prior to beginning the debt management program with GreenPath, I would describe my financial life as willy-nilly. My credit wasn't in a good place at all. I had this mountain of debt that wasn't getting paid. I think I had been sent to collections by one credit card. There's a lot of stress and pressure that goes along with that. And being a new mom, it was just more than I knew that I wanted to take on. I can't handle it. I can't raise this little person and make sure he's making it and have this stress and have these financial worries. So it was a wake-up call for me. When I reached out to GreenPath, what made it really, really attractive was knowing that it was the auto deduction process. Once they set up your plan and they determined what you could pay and they negotiated, knowing that they were taking that amount of money out of my bank account regardless of what I did, I became very conscious of making sure it was there. It created an accountability and a discipline for me working through the debt management program. After talking to the different service providers when I was considering who I wanted to go through this process with, the engagement with the GreenPath debt counselor, it was genuine. I feel like I was being set up for continued success. It wasn't after finishing this debt management program, I felt like I was equipped with the tools and the knowledge to not end up back here again in 10 years. My counselor, she helped me create a budget to show how this is how, the rest of your life should look once we cover your bills. And also just that knowing when the debt would be clear. It kind of gives you that goal to work for. So that also carries with me to this day, that there's an excitement for me in either seeing something decrease or watching something grow. I kind of went into adulthood without this foundation of knowing that I needed to manage my life, my household on a budget. Even though my parents did it religiously, it didn't click for me consciously because we never talked about it. So I think, again, having that formal education from GreenPath was a tremendous game changer for me.
Now, I wanted to share the video with you, and I will tell you, there are multiple. And I typically say these brave individuals share their financial laundry in public because they want to pay it forward. GreenPath has had such a positive impact on their lives. They want to make sure other people know about us. So you can go on our website and you can check out these testimonials. We do not give payments or anything for these types of testimonials, and there are so many of them. And I'm sure you might recognize yourself in some of the individuals that have shared their stories with us. So when it comes to getting support, there's a lot of other support that you can get through the GreenPath program. Now, just to be clear, there are other credit counseling, nonprofit, 501(c)(3) credit counseling education organizations, as well as GreenPath. There are others. GreenPath, because we are a large organization, can provide lots of other tips and tools as well, because we are a larger company. So we do have a Facebook page for people who are on the debt management plan. We have a mobile app where you can see that your payments are being made, so you have confidence that you're on track. We have a client portal where you can share statements with us, ask questions, and things of that nature. So there's a lot of support along with the debt management plan if it is something that you need to do. Now, I did notice we did have a question. Paige asked a question about, can you leave a card open if you're on a debt management plan? And typically, Paige, yes, you can. But you will need to work with your creditors, or you'll need to work with your financial wellness expert at GreenPath. They'll be able to look which accounts you have and see if there is one that makes sense for you to leave open. Typically, you want to have a zero balance on the card that you leave open. And I would agree. I travel for work too. If you do not have a credit card to hire that car, it can be a nightmare. Same with booking the hotel. So we have a lot of people who go through that. So for sure, yeah, there are options. So I did want to make sure we tackled that question. So just to close out, just tips for staying on track. I know we've covered a lot of information today, and obviously you can go back and listen to the recording. You can go to the website and check GreenPath out, check out the Learning Lab courses. But hopefully you're seeing at least one of these options resonates for you. It's captured your attention and it feels like it might be realistic for you. Now, one of the things I will say, regardless of the option that you choose, here's a few tips to stay back on, to keeping you on track. Obviously, you want to have that budget and spending plan. Be sure to develop an accurate plan. And it really is important that you don't just put that budget together, but you track. Are you sticking with that plan? I'll give you an example. My husband retired in April of last year. We had a budget for retirement for him. And every single month, I'm pulling those transactions from my account and I'm making sure that our spending is matching what we plan to spend. And that's important for yourself as well. So obviously, tracking that spending is going to be a key factor. So get the budget together, track the spending closely, and make sure. Give yourself some rewards. If you're shopping with younger children and they want those different treats, if you can incentivize them. Hey, our budget might be $200. Every $2 less that we spend on our grocery bill, we can maybe spend half of that towards some kind of special treat. Maybe we can purchase pizza if we save a certain amount of money. Make sure 50% of it goes to accelerate your debt repayments, but maybe 50% goes towards a treat so you can kind of keep your family engaged. It's really important to develop an emergency savings account. So thinking about tax refund time, if you're going to if you're expecting a tax refund, use that to build a substantial emergency savings account. Especially if you do something like the debt management plan where accounts are getting closed, you need to have something to lean back on. And, look for opportunities to reduce your expenses. Again, this goes back to, it takes all the way back to one of those first few slides. What is your why? What is driving your goal to be debt-free? Use that to focus on your reductions. Think about, what might I reduce? I could sacrifice, maybe currently you eat out, once a week or something. Could I go once every 2 weeks, knowing that this is going to accelerate my debt repayment? So with that, it's thinking about setting those goals and making them realistic, knowing that why, and again, put the Post-its around the house. Get your family involved if necessary. I will say with the Tanisha and Noah video, Noah's gain out of Tanisha's journey is that now he understands the importance of budgeting, because she has taught Noah She's brought him along this journey with her. He's very much aware of what they did and how they did it. And Tanisha getting her debt paid off allowed her to be able to purchase a house within 2 years and go into the purchase debt free. So there's a huge opportunity for getting out of debt. It's not just dollars and cents. It does provide us with financial opportunities, but it also improves our quality of life. It takes down our stress. It helps us build better relationships at home and things of that nature. So I did talk, obviously, GreenPath. We do obviously partner with MSUFCU. We have been in this space for over 6 decades, over half a century. We provide that financial assessment. We will help you build that budget. And we'll pull your credit to take a look at what's impacting your credit at this point. We can also advise on housing. You know, if you're struggling with the mortgage payment, or maybe it's the rent, we can help you there as well, along with the general options for dealing with debt. We are simply a phone call away. So this is our phone number. You can contact us as well via this particular website, thegreenpath.com/MSUFCU. And one of the things I do want to do, I'm going to just drop out of the PowerPoint now, because I do want to show you this website, because I really do think it's important for you to do your due diligence. Again, I'm unashamedly biased about GreenPath, but you're going to want to know that you're working with the right organization. And coming to our website, checking out, you know, the debt counseling, what services we offer, it can be really important. You'll also find some testimonials on our website as well. Lots of great information. You know, how you might qualify, things of that nature. Some main resources, what is the plan? Learning about scores. So lots of Q&As on here too. So be sure to come to this website and check it out. If you're worried about or curious if the debt management plan might be appropriate, we've actually got a very simple debt calculator here that you can use. It also has some links to some testimonials, the benefits, got a short video about the plan as well, and all the way down to some more testimonials. So come to the website and check us out. And again, if you just want to do some more learning, maybe you think you're going to tackle this on your own and you're curious about the snowball or avalanche, you want more information about that, you can kind of take a look at the online courses here. And we can kind of pop that link to that course into the chat as well. Trace, do you have that handy, or can I drop that in there?
Sure. Let's see. I think I already posted it.
Oh, perfect. Alrighty.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You're super efficient.
Let me grab it again and I'll just repost it down here. There we go.
So again, I appreciate you having the courage to come to the presentation today. It does take courage to take these steps. So I applaud you for that. And if you need that motivation, go watch some of these videos. It is amazing. You'll recognize yourself. It's just having that motivation and courage to get on track. And again, I'm going to hang around for a few more. I know we're kind of got 10 more minutes here to the end, but I'm going to hang around and answer any questions you may have, or maybe, if you have some general feedback, I'd love to hear that too. Trace, is there anything else you would add?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I think your presentation really covered everything in great detail. Hopefully everyone kind of got a little bit more positive outlook on tackling their own debt with some of these options, and kind of getting more clarity on what would be right for their own situation. So that's definitely something to consider. But no, I think that was just a great presentation. Yeah, and I haven't seen any other questions pop through, but I just wanted to, again, thank you, Catherine, for the presentation today, and let everyone know that, once again, you can access this recording within a few weeks on our YouTube seminar series playlist. So you can just search for that and find a lot of our previously recorded sessions as well, with some different topics. And then I just wanted to also share that our next webinars include advancing your business. So if you do own your own small business or large business, there's some good tips in that session with some of our commercial business lenders and business account specialists as well, giving some information on that. and that is on January 17th. And then we also have another session focusing on credit card debt specifically with a credit card coach from Nichols, is one of our fintechs, one of our financial technology partners. And so they will be with us on January 25th. So you can register for those events at your convenience, and we hope to see you then. So with that, I'm going to stop recording, and then we'll address any other further questions that anyone has submitted.